Hello, it's Will, your werewolf. Please like and subscribe for the channel. It'd be very nice if you did. This is a bit more of a gory story. I have been a bit too nice recently. So this is what happened last Tuesday. Hope you enjoy it. Bye. I held my palm paw over his face and nose. The snot and saliva bubbled as he tried to shift his pitiful puss from my grip. I pinned him hard to the table, enjoying the crushing sensation as I pushed and I smothered. He could no longer make any significant noise through my hand. He got awfully angry at me before in his Audi while awaiting an audaciously long change of lights. I was a little bit hesitant at the lights as there was a definite confabulation going on to the left of me at the junction. There were a number of confused drivers really not knowing what to do, and I was definitely not going to be pulling out in front of any of them. None of them were going to get an opportunity to even look at my paintwork, never even mind touch it. Now, I think of myself as a patient wolf, but this man had done it wasn't the best thing a person could do. The Audi man made me aware of his anger aggressively by hammering his horn and haranguing me. I looked in my rearview mirror to gauge my new target, and it brought me a smile. It was a big guy in his late 40s in one of those Q5 things. You know, the type of man that thinks they run the world. These are the type that I love to show that they don't, and that they have no power in reality. I had gotten out of my vehicle and walked back towards the Audi, smiling and grinning. Fen was laughing as he wandered alongside me. This was going to be fun, but it couldn't really be done here now, and in the manner that I wanted to. There's too many people. As I got closer to the car, the man forced his way out of the car. He was a very big man. It took some time. Fen stopped short and looked up at him as he yodeled his threats in a deep and scary voice. He was a man, a very big man. This was going to be so fucking cool. Fen sent into my mind as he nodded his head towards him. Are we fucking him up here or what? Come on, Will. Let's wolf out and fuck him up in front of his peers, or at least kick him in the nuts to shut him up, please. I smiled and looked down on my little wolf soul. Well, he's not so little, to be honest. No, I sent him, you get in the passenger seat and let's hope he's going somewhere a little quieter where we can take our time. Fen smiled. A wolf smile. It's pretty cool, actually. Okie dokie, he said, trotting around to the passenger side and hopping through the door and into the seat. I stopped in front of the giant, looked up and went into my dram roll. Oh, I am really sorry. I fawned my fear before the man. I had seen it enough times in life to know how to do it very well. Then, simpering, I turned and ran back to my car. I fucking thought so, you snivelling little shit. Get back in your fucking car and get your fucking ass moving, he yelled with a jeer in his voice. He must have felt the most macho man at that moment. I saw him in the rear view mirror postulating in front of the crowd and wanting to be noticed and be feared by his pointless peers. All I could hear was a wolf laughing in his head as Fen started taking the piss out of the man as he got back in the car. When he got in the car, little did he know he had an invisible passenger who could be journeying with him to his destination, where hopefully we could mess up his day. Fen was telepathic GPS that would let me find my target and destroy him. Fen would be my eyes and ears on the journey. It was going to be fun. Now I held my middle fingers on either side of the big man's nose. I could hold his skull in my werewolf form in my cloy-poy hand like an apple could be held in the hand of an average human. He was still shaking and trying to mumble. He was a fool. He had been in the wrong place at the wrong time and done the wrong shit, really. It was an easy meal, an easy meal for me, a very uneasy meal for him, I'm afraid. My fingers points towards his eyes alongside the nose as he stares at me. He feeds my soul with fear. Not fear, it was pleasurable terror that he gave me, much more than fear. The dumps of hormones and the electrical activity in his head are in overload, and it's just the way I like it. Art can be so variable in outcome, I found. I start to imagine the claw of my pinky finger growing, which it did slowly, first extending, then going under the skin of his jawline, tearing and reaching under the flesh. The tip gently touches the bone of his jaw, then scrapes onwards along its path as he tries to scream for, well, something, not crying for help. To try and get the notice of others, I suppose, but maybe he was just trying to scream his pain into an audible form. I'm not sure. The sound was quite beautiful though, and I play with the tune by twisting and turning my fingers and hands in the wound. That's amazing. I pushed my hand yet harder into his face, palm over his mouth to smother him more. I enjoyed the crushing defeat that I could give this thing. He couldn't fight me. He was lost. He could no longer even emit a yell or a cry. He bubbled in a pathetic manner below my hand. Life was good. Well, for some of us. I held on, muffling the noise and trying not to squash the pathetic brain boxes that are human skulls. They're a bit too easily broken, if I'm not careful. He shook his head, trying to dislodge my hand, but he couldn't fight it. I was a bit lost and a bit excited that he'd not lost hope yet. That would come. I wanted him to break. I wanted to break his spirit. He would provide a meal for my ego as well for my body. I held his head securely as the acute pain of the incision stopped for the man. I stopped my worrying of his facial wounds so he could get a moment of relief before I began again on our journey. As I held him there, I kept staring into his eyes, my great amber werewolf eyes looking into those pained, brown, dullard eyes. They were the windows to what was happening in that mind of his. It was where I saw the pain rise and fall as I worked. So much comes from the eyes, and you learn through experience how to work a person's thresholds by using them as a gauge. Sometimes I remove those eyes and work out by just feel, but that can spoil the fun a lot, so I do tend to keep the eyes for use more often than not. It's an easy way of doing it. It's also, it's a nice way of doing it. I looked deeper into his lost soul. He was ready for more pain after his mind had settled. He had dealt with the initial injury and now was going to deal with the pain of the lack of knowledge as to when it would start again. Was mental pain worse than physical pain, or vice versa? I couldn't give a shit, really. I now imagined the claw of my ring finger starting to grow and extend. It grew from the tip of my finger slowly and made its way to the man's eye socket rim. I shifted his focus from my eyes to the extending claw by looking in its direction. He started to try to move his head away from the extending, sharp tip. I just snarled and smiled inside, holding him firmly. He could do nothing. I could do anything. The pointed talon slowly entered the eye socket. First, the tip touched the skin of the bottom eyelid. There it started to push the eyelid over the surface of the eye itself, initially closing it. Then, still growing, the tip slowly pierced the eyelid and touched the white of the eyeball. Do you know how hard it is to puncture or penetrate an eyeball? Even using a sharp surgical scalpel, it takes a lot of pressure to do any cutting or breaking. He was trying to scream through my hand that I pressed on his mouth. He wiggled like the hooked maggot that he was. The talons of my claws hooked the little grub. The sclera is tough. So it took a lot more pressure before the eyeball gave way and burst in a satisfying gush. The aqueous humour spilt now from the deflated sphere onto his cheek. Clear, jelly-like viscous liquid ran down his prominent cheekbone. The joy of it rang in my dark soul. Oh, how he screamed and convulsed as this took place. If only I could have kept his eyes open so that he could see it all happen. Imagine the tip of the claw reshaping your eye, pushing against it and affecting your vision. Imagine the pain and the release of pressure, the pressure of the sharp point digging into your... Then the loss of sight as the eyeball bursts. Oh, the pain. Maybe even a little relief at the ending of the process. Your eye is gone, but you're grateful for the release. I had not allowed him to move, and my palm muffled most of his agonised screams. How weak simple humans are. His whole body tensed and shook at this treatment, and he wrenched his arm from its fixed position on the table. The large nail that had been holding his limbs solid stayed fixed in the wood, while remnants of skin and tegument connected the nail to the torn-out, ripped hole in the freshly freed limb. The image condensed in my mind as it formed in perfect beauty in my view. I was silenced and stunned for a moment as it happened. He grabbed the thick pelt of my arm with his damaged right hand and tried to pull it from his face. I shook him. The point of my claw moved in the now destroyed eye and its socket with his frantic movements, and he went limp. At first I thought he'd died. Then I realised that he'd just passed out from the pain. It was okay. He would soon wake. I could then continue. I'd not ruined it, thank fuck. That would have been such a shame. It is far too easy to kill people, you know. I need to be so much careful, much more careful in life, actually. As he, let's say, slept, I re-nailed his hand to the table so that he could not get it free again when he woke. I sat back and watched and waited. Oh, by the way, some advice on nailing people to things. Please don't do it actually through the hands. They are a bit too delicate and teary. They can be easily torn off nails by someone struggling. I like to go in at the wrist, at the base of the hand, sort of in the wristy bit, into the meaty structures there. Sometimes you nick the blood vessels and arteries, but if you're pretty careful and stay to the inside of the wrist, then you get an excellent spot to nail a person down. Sometimes it annoys me how hard it is to have fun with people. My posit now left my body for a moment. Fen sat next to me on the floor, me the human and him the wolf part of me. We shared our thoughts on things. We discussed what we would like for our evening meal that day ahead. He got to taste the food I ate as though he ate it. And he had a thing for Mexican food at the moment, and we were well into our delivery order when, with a forced intake of breath, the spread-eagled man on the table woke. He coughed up some mucus and blood and turned his head to vomit on the table and the floor. "Help me. Help me," he breathed to an unseen, uncaring and, frankly, non-existent audience. I was sitting naked on the ground, my back to the wall opposite him, a cheerful smile on my blood-stained face. With painful difficulty, he opened his unbroken eye and met mine. I gave him a little wave. Had to laugh at how good I felt that he did not throw up on my feet. "Welcome back," I said. My posit snarled, and I stood up before him very naked and very bloody and very unashamed. The man begged me to be released. I smiled and shook my head. What, and spoil this fun we're having? Why on earth would I do that, my friend? I walked towards him and started to soak up my posit once more, changing back to the wolfman form I loved so much. Oh, and by the way, it's not a painful flopping and flipping around that you see in the crappy films. The posit seems to leap into me, and I've changed. He kind of turns into a little fog and soaks in through my skin. Not worth the expensive special effects that are often employed in these mega $1 million movies. I change in a manner that is not that photogenic or made for films, I'm afraid. I wish it was more dramatic. The man looked up at me and asked, "What are you?" I laughed, a now guttural and good-natured laugh. He cringed back as far as he could into the table and, through bloody saliva, said, "What do you want from me?" I allowed my head to resume its human shape so I could talk to him. To be honest, I just want to kill you and do that in a long, drawn-out, tortured kind of way, if that's okay with you. What have I done? He asked. Well, you've done all sorts of things that's not nice, I'm sure, I guess in the eyes of your God, he sees you sinning all the time, so maybe he's punishing you by letting me do this shit to you, You weren't very nice in the car to me back there, so I have to pay for that slightly. And to be honest, you must have been a very sinful boy at some time. Like to play with yourself a lot, did you? Or maybe you've not done something fucked up and horrible, but you will do it someday. So God is getting his work done pre-sin. So that's my excuse for what I do, I replied. What did your father do so evil that he passed his sins on to you to suffer for? Ha ha ha! I tried. I went into full thespian mode as I began my Shakespeare-like speech. God sent me to punish the unrighteous amongst his people, to rid the world of sinners. An Old Testament God is he. And then in more of a matter-of-fact manner, I then told him the truth. Well, to be honest, the fact is that I don't really need an excuse for what I do. I do it mostly because I like it. It's fun. I get off on it. He then dropped his head and cried. Tears ran from his eye, snot leaking from his nose. As the werewolf, I am God, and I am going to crush these insignificant creatures for no other reason than it feels terrific. No God can tell me what to do. I am the one. Spot the Highlander quote right there, please. I walked to the table, flexing my hands into fists, ready to finish the work that I'd started. I am an artist when it comes to this shit. I'm a professional. Also, I was getting bored and a bit hungry, and sometimes you have to eat. Eating living flesh is the tastiest, especially while the fleshy thing watches you eat it. That's always good. I reached out to the man and tore the t-shirt from his torso. My claws projected from my right paw. I took the barb now at the end of my pinky finger and pushed it in between the bottom ribs of the man's ribcage. He screamed and asked me to stop. I continued to hook my finger up under the bone and lift. Clunk! So lovely to hear that noise. He screamed again and I sighed. Not long for him to live now. He has started to lose too much blood from his wound. His blood pours from the incision that I have created. On top of that, he has probably had too many adrenaline dumps now to register any new horror. He's just a yelling bag now and a little boring, to be honest. I lever the finger beneath the chest through the intercostal muscle. Oh, how he warbles. He opens his soul audibly to me. I can feel the agony and the loss of hope as he gives his all. Eventually, with much effort, the rib pops clear of the cartilage of his sternum. He goes silent. The only noise, the gasp for breath as he struggles now to get air into his damaged chest. Only gentle twitches run through his body. I grab the rib between my fingers. He goes rigid, as if at that moment of orgasm. The bone is slick with blood and it's difficult to grasp, but I manage to get it and pull it free from his spine with another satisfying clunk. It now moves freely, just being held by the muscle, skin and fascia. I struggle to tear it free from its body. It's difficult for him too, and he passes out once more with pain. Eventually it gives away with a tearing sound like wet silk being ripped. Well, I suppose it sounds like a rib being torn from a body really, but you've probably never heard that. He is now limp. I check his pulse in his neck. It's there, it's weak, but it's there, and I gently shake the man's head until he slowly wakes again. I give him a couple of gentle slaps. Eventually his eye opens and he muzzly, and with a little attempted moan or two wakes up. I take his chin in my hand and show him his rib as he does so. I then take the rib and slowly put it between the carnassials of my jaws and crunch it. His unbroken eye is now dark, not registering what is going on anymore. He slowly comes back as he sees me chewing on his rib. It crunches delightful meat. Oh, it's so delightful in my mouth. The wolf part of me enjoying the marrow in the centre of the bone. He tries to whimper and then goes limp. He's on his last journey to wherever he believes he's going, and I start to eat. This meal is better than any Mexican. Cancel the order, please.